Hi everyone. Today we are going to build a recruitment platform. The platform should help recruiters sieve through multiple candidates, take some tests using AI, and further mark the status of the users as either shortlisted as next step or rejected or whatever they want to process it as. We are going to build this application in Flutterflow. Now, as we build this in Flutterflow, the first thing that we need to decide is about the database structure. So how exactly we will create different collections in Firebase. In case you are completely new to Flutterflow and you do not know about Firebase and Flutterflow at all, I will suggest you see my first video on creating a quiz app where I share about building a quiz app from scratch, and where I cover very basic things like creating a Firebase project or creating a Flutterflow project as well. So today we'll just assume that some of that basic knowledge is already there, right? And we will build this application for recruitment. Um, let's start on the database structure. So let's see what the user flow will be like, and accordingly we will build the database structure. Now we will just think about the user flow of a recruiter as well as a job seeker. So basically there are two main stakeholders for this platform, right? One is a recruiter and one is a job seeker. So let's start with recruiter first, right? So if we are looking at recruiter, and what are the different screens that they would go through. So they would first is, of course, there needs to be a login, right? And once they are logged in, they should be able to create um, job description, right? And once they have created this job description, they should be able to share these to multiple people, so that so that applicants or whoever is a job seeker can apply for those jobs that are there, right? Now, against every job description, they also need to see all the applications that are coming in, right? And these applications, there will be some amount of scoring that will happen based on the CV or based on tests that are given, and then there should be an option to mark the status where they will share whether the candidate is rejected or the candidate is selected for further rounds, etc. Right? So we'll just build this simple workflow, right, for the recruiter. Now, if we think of a job seeker, what is the flow over there, right? So if we look at job seeker, again, it will start with login, right? And post login, the first thing that probably they will see is the job descriptions that have been shared by the recruiter, right? So different jobs listings that are there, and if they have to apply for a particular job, they should be able to submit their details, upload their CV, right? And post this, if they get so there could be a basic level of shortlisting by the recruiter, in which it will be a CV based shortlisting, or they might get a test straight away, right? This will be an AI based test that they will get, and once they complete the test, their scores, etc., will be shared with the recruiter, and against the job and the application that they have submitted, right? Again, so this will all be part of I would say, the same application, right? That they have done for that job, and against that application they would also need to know the status, the same status which is being updated by the recruiter as a job seeker, right? So this is a simple flow of what might be needed when we are looking at a recruiter and a a recruiter experience and a job seeker experience. So if we have to think about different collections that are required in Firebase, so Firebase is basically our where we have our database, right? So or the data that will be showed in the application will be stored over there. So we need to decide a structure of what that data structure will be like, right? So so now let's think of it very the first and foremost the basic collection that is required, right? So if I have to think of all the collections that are required, first and foremost will be a user collection. Now, because there are two types of users, one is a job seeker and there's a recruiter. Apart from the basic details of the email ID or the phone number, etc., what we will need is a user type, right? Which will specify whether the person is a job seeker or it is a recruiter, right? The other important collection that will be there is the job listing collection, right? Which will be created by the recruiters, where they will add the job description. So there will be like the job description related to it, or the salary details, right? Or the location details of the job, etc. There would be like few other details that that will be required, right? The third important database collection, if you look at the flow that is up there, is that there are applications which are interacting both in the recruiter flow as well as in the job seeker flow, right? So these applications will be against the job listing, but we will not create it within the job listing. We'll create that as a separate collection altogether, right? So there will be applications, and we will provide a reference of against which job. So the first thing that it needs is a job reference, right? So this will be a document reference of the job listing collection, all the documents that are there, so that we are able to identify that this particular application is towards this job listing. Now, it could have been handled in another way also, like we could have created a sub collection within this job listing to do this application. Like it could so it could be like a 2.1 over here, and there could be an applications sub collection instead of creating a separate collection, which is also an approach that we can use. If we are doing a sub collection, in that case this job reference field is not required, right? But apart from the job reference field, the other details, so this will be like the applicant details which are required, right? Which could be the name, phone number, email ID, CV of the person, etc., right? Then we will have, once using AI, we will generate a resume score for the recruiters to look at, right? So there will be a resume score which will be generated using AI. And then there will be a part of the result of the test that is given. So once a test is shared, right, so there will be a test score, or it could be detailed results as well, test results, let's say, um, uh, based on the AI test. The other part against each and every application would be a status, which is important for both the recruiter as well as the job seeker, right? Now, the same thing, it can also stay as a sub collection if, let's say, we choose to use it as a sub collection within job listing. It is not necessary to create it as a separate collection over here. um, I think so. These are the main collections that will be required in Firebase. There could be few others that might be needed as well, but that we will see as we move along. Now, another important decision that we have to make while we are thinking about Flutterflow is whether these two, recruiter flow and the job seeker flow, will be the same application or will these be different applications. It can be managed in both cases. In if it is the same application, there would be a recruiter login and a job seeker login on the same page. But if it is a different application, the logins will be different, and it will be more cleaner. Whereas if it is a single application, we need to apply more conditional logic on which flow to be shown once user has logged in, etc. In our current case, we are going to choose of building both as separate applications to keep things simpler, so that we are able to build the recruiter flow as a separate application and a job seeker flow as a separate application. Note that both the applications will be talking to the same Firebase database, right? So the database is going to be common. The user collection, the job listing, applications, all this collection is going to be common and not different for the two applications. And we are going to see how that works in Flutterflow. All right, so this is the basic structure that I wanted to share before we get started on building the project. Now we'll start with the project. So we are going to create a new project by the name of Recruit Flow. Create blank. So it should create a new project. So it's given the project name. Now this package name is an important part, as I would have shared earlier as well. So do not just let it be as com.mycompany.recruiter, because this package name becomes a unique identifier if you are publishing it on mobile apps, be it iOS or Android, right? So I'm going to change this to our parent company name, which is Bibli. So com.bibli to recruiter. Now it is asking me to select the theme for the project. Right. So sort of, I'm okay going with any of these two themes. So I'll just go with the purple tones one. I do want to publish it as the web, so I'm going to enable web, and this I'm going to do later because I've already created the Firebase project and I just need to link it to the application. So I'm just going to hit start building, right? Now, so this project is started, but the first thing that we need to do is link Firebase project over here, right? So let me go to Firebase first. So I've already created a project, and initially I wanted to name the project as Recruit. So that's why you see Firebase project as Recruit. This is the first screen that you will see after creating a new Firebase project, right? So what we'll do is we'll go to the settings part, right? We'll look at these project settings. Now this project ID, etc., is important for you to link to Flutterflow over there, right? So I'm going to copy this project ID, and I'll just go to Firebase settings, right? And I'm going to connect this. So before connecting, one important thing is that you need to give permissions to this project, right? So in users and permission, you need to add member and call this Firebase @flutterflow.io. Give editor access to this email ID, and then click on add member, because this is how Flutterflow actually interacts with Firebase using this ID, right? So you need to give access to the Firebase project using this ID. Then we come back over here and we hit connect, right? So yeah, so it's already connected. The second thing that we need to do is generate config files. But before I generate config files, I'll switch on authentication in Firebase. Right, so I'll go to Firebase in build. You see this authentication part, right? So we just say get started. Authentication is used to for authenticating users on the account whenever they came in, and there are different types of authentication. The native providers that Firebase has is email, password, phone authentication, and anonymous. So right now we are going to add email password as an authentication method, right? We save this. I'm going to add another sign-in provider, which is Google, and this is what we are going to use actually to create login parts. So let's just call it Recruiter. Public faces name is Recruiter. Support email. I'm going to give my email over here and save. Okay. The other provider which is typically used is phone login, and in phone login, make sure you add some number for testing, which we can use right now. So I generally add this, enable this, and hit on save. Okay, so now authentication is enabled in my Firebase project, right? So I'll go back. So maybe it is asking for an authentication page. I'm not sure. So, but let me just create it. Okay, auth one. That's okay. Enable authentication. Create user collection. Login page. We need a blank page, which we call as the home page. Right. And we hit start building. And so let me try this again. Okay, so that worked. I think it was basically because Firebase was not enabled in the initial setup, right? And the pages were not there, post which it generated these config files. So now Firebase is set up, and it is linked to our Flutterflow project. We can go about building things now, right? Now the first page that you see is the sign in page, sign up page, because I intend to launch this on a web application, so I'm going to look at the larger version of it. I do not want to use Apple login, so I'm going to delete this. Right, so I go to sign up and I also delete this. Okay, now continue with Google. It already has an these actions linked. So this is the benefit with using templates, because you don't really need to make a lot of changes in their login systems. Are again over here in the email sign up also, you see that they have these details set up already, right in the sign in and sign up page. So I'm going to leave it as it is, and we will actually test it out, right? So now the home page, it has this page title. Let's just call it home page for now. And we will go about building our workflows very soon. But let's first see if our authentication page is working fine or not. Um, I know that it won't, but let's look at the errors, and then we will resolve those errors. All right, so we have the sign in sign up page over here. So let's see, we will just press this continue with Google. Now you see there's an error that came. This domain is not authorized for OAuth, right? So that happens because for the Google authorization to work, you need to add the domain which is using Google authorization into authorized domains in Firebase, right? Now, it being the test session, now one thing that you might think is that this app.flutterflow.io is the domain, and let's add that as the authorized domain. That's not correct for the testing version. That will be true once you make it live and add that particular domain, but not true over here. So for here, we'll just check in local what is the domain it is throwing up. Okay, so did it give a domain which I can use? Right. So you see this error over here. The current domain is not authorized for OAuth operations. This will prevent sign in with pop-up, sign in with redirect, etc., etc. Add your domain, which is ff-debug service frontend -pro xyz over to OAuth redirect domains list in Firebase console, right? So the error is very clear what we need to do. So we need to add this domain which starts with ff-debug-service. So we are going to go and going to copy this, and we are going to add this in Firebase, right? So in authentication, we go to settings, we go to authorized domains, and in authorized domains we add domain and paste this particular domain, and we hit add, right? And try it out again. Right, so once we do continue with Google, it is showing me different emails that I have, and I'm going to use my ID to log in over here. So now if you see, we are on home page, but there's no nothing that we can do over here, nor we can log out to go back to the previous page. So the first thing that I'll do actually is build a small profile page which we will use for logout, and also add a nav bar below which will help us navigate through the application, right? So I'm going to uh, s- mm, switch on an app navbar, but it says gives a problem. It says that you can only activate navbar when there are two pages, right? Which have show on navbar set. Right now we have only home page, and that also we have not set as show on navbar, right? So we are going to create one more page, and this will be of course a blank page, but this will be, let's say, a profile page, right? Now in this profile page, we are going to switch this on to show on navbar. Let's give an icon of profile, right? So I'm going to choose new one. I go to home page, and home page the icon is fine, right? And profile also I have set to show on navbar. So now the navbar is functional, right? Now on the profile page, while we will do the other configurations later, we are going to first add a logout button so that we are able to log out when we want to, and we are able to go to the sign up page, right? So in the column, we are just going to add a button. This underlined. What I'm doing right now is just wrapping the column in the container so that it takes up the entire space and not just the the column width based on the items inside it. Now this is a solo button which we are going to just name as logout and add an action of logout, right? So that should, this page title I'm going to put over here, user profile. Okay. While we are going to add other things related to like profile details and other aspects that we want in profile, but right now I'm just using this for logout, right? So now let's look if this uh, got activated. So I go to profile, hit on logout. Yeah, so it takes me to the sign up page. Now I'm going to try and sign in again with the same ID. Right. So now it's time to build the home page, right? So if you remember the user flow, the first thing that we wanted to do was give the recruiter or enable the recruiter to be able to create job listings, right? For that, are going to replicate the database structure that we want in Firebase. So if you look at Flutterflow on the left-hand side, there's an icon for Firebase above which there's connect written, right? And in the collections, users collection is there by default, but we said that we are going to add a string to user collection, which is a user type, right? And I'm going to add this as a string. Now I'm over here, I'm going to create another collection, which is the job listing collection. Okay. Now in job listing collection, what all do we want? We, of course, we want the job title. It is going to be a string. We want the job description, right? This again will be a string. We want the salary details, or let's say compensation, right? So again, we are going to put this as a string. We, apart from compensation, we want the location, which will again be a string, right? And then we want something which we are going to use when we build the AI solution, which will be a list of skills. All right, so this is a list of skills that are required for this particular job, right? And yeah, let's just go ahead with these, right? Job listing right now, and while we are here, we'll also just create the other collection that we wanted. And like I said, that there are two options to create it: one as a sub collection within this job listing, or as a separate collection altogether. I'm just going to go ahead with the sub collection option. Okay, so we are going to uh, um, call the collection as applications. His sub collection, the parent collection is job listing, and we create it over here, right? We start from scratch, which the details that we need. So we need applicant name, right? We need applicant phone number, so that will be a string again. Applicant email ID, again that's a string. We what we will need again is CV. Now when we talk about the about CV, we'll not be able to add it directly as an option over here. But what we will do was an applicant CV URL. So when somebody uploads the CV, it will get stored in Firebase storage, and we want to store the URL in database so that it will be accessible, right? So I'm going to add that as a string. um, so we did name, phone number, email ID, CV, URL. Do we need anything else? um, right now? Okay, so another thing that we wanted was for recruiters to be able to manage status over here, right? So we are going to call it application status, right? Again, it's a string, right? All right. So that's our basic collections that are there. Now, when we go to home page, the first let's go to the widget tree. Now, within the widget tree, a general practice that I follow at least is that I replace or wrap this column in a container, right? You saw me doing this for the other page as well, and give it 100% width and height so that it takes the entire space. Okay. Now now we come to the column, right? So we are what we want is we show the job listings that the user has created in the past, right? And also give an option to create a new job listing. So we are going to add this text over here and call this as my um, job list, let's say, right? And this, I'll go to this column. I want this all to be left aligned, right? um, this particular test with respect to formatting, etc., if you would want this to be a headline, you can select something like a title large, right? And and then in the column we are going to add a container within which we will add a list view. So this list view will have the list of jobs which are pertaining to this particular user, right? So this container, again, I'm going to give a width of 100%. Height, I'm going to limit it to, let's say, 500 pixel. uh, okay, 500 pixel, within which this list view will be there. So what is this list view? This list view will be a list of jobs that the user has already created. Right now the user has not created anything, but you need to give or keep provision for the user to be able to create some jobs, right? So now within list view I want to show the job details so that the user can easily navigate through that. So I'm going to use something called cards from the templates that are existing. So I can pick any one card and then format it as per my requirement, right? So let's say I'll use, so we don't need an image, we only need text, and probably the later on we can show number of people who have applied to that job, right? um, so so I'll just go on top. We are going to use let's use this one, right? So okay, so now in the list view, what we want is, or what we want to have is all the jobs that are created by this particular user, which reminds me that we've missed one important aspect when we created the job list collection, and which is giving reference of the user that has created these jobs, right? Because if I query it directly, it will give me all the jobs that have been created by any user. But we want to add something called like a ref, let's say recruiter, which will be a document reference of the type users, and this will be whichever recruiter is creating this job listing, that will get added over here as well, so that when we are querying the job list, we are only showing those job lists which are made by that particular recruiter, right? So now I'll go back to my page. On this container, I'm going to add a query, add query, query collection. I'm going to query job listings. I want list of documents. I'm going to add a filter. The filter is basically that the ref recruiter is equal to authenticated user reference, right? So what is this is doing over here is it is taking the reference of the recruiter, whoever created that particular job, and it is equating with whoever is signed in, right? So it is going to show only those job listings which are created by this particular user by filtering all the jobs that have been created by this particular recruiter. Okay. Right, so right now I don't want to order it by anything, although later on we can add a date for the job list and order that by date, etc. So I'll confirm this, right? And now I'm going to use this query as to create children of this list view. So the concept of list view or page view, these two widgets, is that you can create multiple children which can be part of the list. So if you see in the list view right now, there is only one item, right? Now we want to display all the 8, 10 or 20 or 30 jobs that are there. So I do not know at this moment how many jobs are going to be there or going to be displayed in this list view, which means that this needs to be dynamic, right? It cannot be static, that I decide right now that I am going to show 3 jobs, or I am going to show 5 jobs, or I am going to show 6 jobs over here. So what I'll do is I'll go in this list view. I'm going to go to an option which you see the fourth option over here beside the add a query option, which is called generate dynamic children, right? Now, this is something that is very useful in creating dynamic lists, which just connects with the database and creates these aspects, right? So I'm going to give this a variable name. Let's say, so this is like list of jobs, right? List of jobs. Okay, max items, I'm not going to put any limit right now. And I'm going to link this to the query that we already did. So we did the query and we stored it in the container which is holding this list view. So if you see, if I hover over this job listing documents, it shows me on the left hand side, if you see, it is flickering, right? Left hand side container, which means that it is the query that we just added a few minutes back, right? So I'm going to use this to create dynamic children, that all the items, all the job lists that are there in that collection, they get added over here, and I'll hit save. So it is going to give me a message. The widget will now generate its children dynamically from the specified variable. In Flutterflow language, these are called children. The parent widget is the list view, and then each list item is a child of list view, and because they are multiple, so they're calling it children, right? And what it says is simply edit the first child. So we do not need to edit each and every, of course you cannot edit because it is going to be generated dynamically. So we can only edit the first child in the list view to see how it looks, right? So now you see there is something happened over here. There is a grayed out versions of this list view that got created, right? Now what I'm going to do is, in this card, I'm going to link the different text items that you see. So this username, if I hit on this variable option, so what I want is that this represents one job item, right? We want to show the job title of that particular job over here. So you see something called list jobs item. Whenever you create dynamic children, it always appends this thing called item. And if you remember, if we go back to the list view, the variable that we created was list jobs, which means that when I'm trying to refer, or when I'm trying to link the username, and I'm getting this option of list jobs item, it is referring to the item of that variable list jobs, which means it is a single item, which means that it is a job. So if I tap on this, it is going to show me all the options of job listing collection, right? And so I'm just going to select job title over here, and that's all, right? So this will link the job title. Now I want to show the description. I'm going to click over here. I'm going to again go to list job item. I'm going to say job description. Now we can link other things related to company salary, etc., all that as well, but for demonstration I'm not adding all those things right now. Okay. So I do want to give some padding between these items. It is looking very cluttered. So I go to the column, and I choose an option which says item spacing, so it gives by default all the items that are created in that column, it will give an item spacing of 10, right? And in the overall column, I want to give some padding. I don't want it sticking to the frame, so so it gave some padding of 10 over here to so that it looks a bit neater. All right. So this is the job list, but now the problem is that there is nothing in this job list, right? We we need to give an option to the user to be able to create the first job. Okay. So what we are going to do is that we are going to add a button, and this button we are going to call create job. Okay. um, but what will this button do? This button needs to be able to add details of job title, job description, salary, other details that are there, so that that gets stored in the document. For that we are going to use something called a bottom sheet. Okay, so for using a bottom sheet, there is a concept called usage of components in Flutterflow, right? So like, so if I go over here to the list of pages, you see that these are pages, right? Now, pages you would very clearly understand. But there is another concept which is called components, which is this diamond shaped icon that you see over here. This component is something, is it's not a page, but it is basically a widget which can be used repeatedly across the app by calling that particular component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a form which will help us capture all the job details as a component, and then I will call the component when somebody clicks on create job. All right, so let's go to this components and click over here. I say new component, right? So it now, if you see, it is giving you different options of a components, like what can be added, etc. But I'm going to go ahead with create a blank component. So here it is, job details, that job details form, right, that we want to add. Now in this job, so if you see, once I clicked on it, it opened a new canvas where it is just showing me this job details form. Now in this job details form, I'm going to first of all add a container, right? And I'm going to give it 100% width and height. Actually, height we can limit it to, let's say, 300 pixels, 300 pixels, so that if the screen is too big, it is not covering the entire space. Whereas as width can be 100%, but if for larger screens, we can give a maximum width of 500. Okay. Now in this container, I'll add a column, right? And first I'll add a text will call it as job details, and then I'm going to add a form, right? So so that will be again a column, and I'm going to add something called a form validation, right? And I'll explain the meaning of this form validation later, right? Why I'm adding this form validation. But assume that it is used for something, for checking if all the fields are validated or not, right? Now in the column, the first thing that you would want to capture is the job title, right? So for that, what the item that is used is called a text field. So this is a text field. In the hint, I would so there will be a place for hint, so I would say add job title, right? In the column, then I will add another text field. Okay, so it is max lines 4, because this I'm going to right over here to add description. Description. Then I'm going to add, because we basically have to take all uh, all strings items only. So text field is something that we are going to use. So I'm going to duplicate this and just change it over here, right? So I instead of add compensation. Now for a thing like compensation, you can also add a drop down. If let's say it is ranges, you want to add to something, some ranges between whatever, like $5,000 to $10,000 or $10,000 to 15,000, like that, 4 5. Then instead of text field, we can use a drop down. As of now, I'm leaving it open like a text field, right? I go to this third one, and apart from compensation, we wanted the location details, right? And then we are this job description. Now in the main column, I'm going to go and add a button of, and call it add job details, right? So I'm just going to name these text fields because we are going to use this. So this is for job title, this is for compensation, this is for location, and this is for job description. Okay. So what I added in the hint was for front end. What I added just now is for the code to remember that, because when we are going to add a button, we are going to use these fields to add to the document of job listings, right? So now, okay, so this now has the details, or 3 4 details. There could be further details as well that we can add later, but now if I have to add an action over here, what we want to do in this add job details is create a document again. So in Firebase, the nomenclature is job listing is a collection. Each item within that is called a document. So whenever I call something as a document, I'm referring to that, right? So when I say add job details, I'm going to this action, I'm going to say create document, right? And the type, so it's asking me what is the type of document. So I'm going to select job listing, right? And within job listing, it's asking me to set the field. So first field that we are going to set is job title. From variable, the variable that we are going to use is something that we will see in what is called as widget state. So this component is a widget, right? Whatever is being added in those text field gets stored in this widget state. So if you look at widget state, what I added this now, and again you can see the flickering over there on the left hand side in dark orange. When I go to job title, it refers to that. When I go over compensation, it refers to that as well, right? So so I'm going to select job title, which is the first field. Then I add field, which so it gave me job description. So from variable, I'm going to add job description over here. Then it is asking me for compensation. Again, from variable in widget state, I'm going to add compensation, and then location, right? From variable, and in widget state, I go ahead and add location, right? What are the other things? List of skills, right? So these are the list of skills that I wanted for activating activating AI tools to see if the CV has those list of skills or not, right? And but right now, for the purpose of this session, we are not going to add it. I'm going to add it later after the session, right? So this would require either a drop down from which users can select a wide range of skills, right? So that it is more fixed in a way, or we allow them to add multiple skills as well, which again there is a way to do that, right? So I'm just going to remove this right now. I'm going to give a name to this in auction output called job details, right? Now when somebody hits on this add job details, this document is going to get created. The reason I added this button called form validation is because I want to validate whenever these fields are getting added, and in case something is not filled in, then it should throw an error, right? So in validation, there are multiple things that can be validated, like if it is a phone number or a something which requires integers and digits, then that can be validated as well, which is not something that we want. So I'm going to switch on this validation, automatically validate, right? And the error message is job title is required, right? I'm not going to put a minimum and max character limit on this. Text validator, I'm not going to put anything as well, but I'm just going to switch all of these on so that a user knows that they need to add all of these parts, right? Now, when I go to this job details and this action comes in, um, okay, so before I go on, this is what I opened just now is an action flow editor, right? So there are two ways. If it is a single action, we can add the way we added over here, but if there are multiple actions, we can open this action flow editor and add actions. So what I want to do is add an action for form validation, right? So validate form, and there's only one form which is over here, so we are going to select this, right? And this option is on terminate if validation fails, and I'm going to call this form validated, right? Now you see the action is right now after creating the document, which is not something that we want, so we are going to move this up, right? And we are going to add a conditional over here. In the conditional, we are going to select form validated as the conditional action. We are going to copy this backend action and paste it over here. So if the form is validated, then it will create the document. I'm going to delete this action. If the form is not validated, then ideally I want to like show an error over there, right? Now for showing an error, we are going to use a small concept called a page state or a component state variable, right? So over here in job details form, I'm going to create a component state, which is form actually we are going to get right, so we get this form validated as a page state variable, right? Description, it's not necessary that you add a description, but we are going to set this as boolean. We are going to keep this as false in the beginning, and we are going to confirm this. All right, the reason why I added this is because I want to show an error message over here, so I'm going to add a text over here. The text will be written as um, please fill in all details of the form, right? And this column, I'm just going to give some item spacing. So if you see the container height, we need to increase a bit. Okay, so please fill in all details of the form. Now you don't want to show this message always, you only want to show this when form validated um, is uh, uh, sort of not true, right? Which means that initially we will set this as true. The form validated part is something that will set it as true, right? So if we are going to put this visibility over here, and we are going to say form validated component state, we are going to take the opposite action. So if form is not validated, then it is going to show this, right? And we want to show this in probably a red color, like an error message, right? So that the user is able to understand that there was some error and they need to fill in the details again, right? So so now if you notice, our component state is true, right? Which means that it will always be true and it will not show this text message. But in this action item, what I can do is that if this form validated is false, I can add an action of updating component state. I update the component state form validated, and I set this value as true. So in case there is an error, it will set the value of form validated as true. It will rebuild the current component, and this red error message will be shown, right? Now, once it, if let's say the user is trying again, you have to understand that the component value is now true. So we need to add another action over here, so that in the beginning, when they are trying it again, we are resetting the value of the component state, right? So I want to add as a first action. I'm going to add this field form validated, and I'm going to reset value. Okay, so what we did over here was this particular form validated um, uh, um, option is getting changed when the form is not validated. But in the next try, we do want that it is checked or it is evaluated in a fresh manner, right? It should not be true the next time it is somebody is pressing the button. So that's why the first thing that we are doing is we are resetting the value to its original state, and its original state, like you saw, was something which is true, right? So okay, so we made one error over here. So this component state, we have to set this to false, not true, right? So form validated is false, of course, right? And rest everything is fine, right? Initial value is true when if the form is not validated, when we are changing this to false. Okay. All right. So we are through with this little component that we created. Now, in the job details form or in the container, we are going to add an option to be able to dismiss this bottom sheet. Like this pop-up opens up right now. We have not added any action to dismiss this pop-up, right? So we are going to do that now. For that, typically the way I like doing it is giving the option with a cross button on the right hand side, right? So I've wrapped this column in a stack. Stack is a widget where you can layer multiple widgets on top of the other. So one is the column. I want to layer a cross button, which will be an icon button, right? And this icon button I'm going to align on the right hand side. The the icon will be that of a cross. Okay, so all right, or let's say close. Yeah. Right, so now in this close button we are going to go to this add action, and there's something called dismiss bottom sheet, right? So like I said, that this particular component, when it is called a bottom sheet. If somebody, let's say, clicked on it by mistake and does not want to fill the full job details, or is not ready to fill the full job details, they should have an option to close this, right? And so that's why we added dismiss bottom sheet option over here. I'm going to give some padding to this, 5 padding over here, right? And now this column is not center aligned, so I'm just going to get this over here and give some padding on top from there as well. Right. So now this particular form is sort of ready, and just this job details, you can give it a title name. Now we'll go back to the page that we were creating, which is the home page. Now this create job, we go to this action button and we say bottom sheet, show bottom sheet, and we select component. So when you select this component, it shows all the list of the components. Right now we have created only one component, so it's showing me just this, right? So we are doing this job details form. Now another thing that we missed while creating this form was, if I go back to this component, when somebody is clicking on this add job details and they're filling it successfully, it is creating a document, but the box will not disappear because we have not added an action to dismiss the bottom sheet, right? So if it is true, if it is false, I don't want to dismiss it, but if it is true, I'm going to add an action to dismiss the bottom sheet, right? So that this bottom sheet closes, because once the user has already filled it in, you don't want to show that box, right? So now we go back to the home page. So there's my job list, which is a query of all these different jobs, and there's a create job, which when clicked on will open that bottom sheet. Now there's one more thing that we want to do. Initially, when there is no job created, there will be a query where the list will there will be no list that is getting created, but because we have created the list view, there's a chance that it will show a null error, which we do not want, right? So what we are going to do is that this list view, we are going to add a conditional visibility, right? Or we can actually move this query up to the upmost column. Just you see this right option over here in the query, right? In the query parameter, we can move it to the container, to the topmost container, right? And this particular container, which has the list view, etc., we are going to set a conditional visibility that there should be something in that particular query that we did, right? So for conditional visibility, either you can directly put a boolean, or you can set a condition like this. So in conditions, we say single condition, first value is job listing documents, number of items. So we are counting the number of items in this query of job listing documents. If so when will we see a null error? When it will be 0 and there is nothing in the list, right? So we are going to put something like greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, then only I want to show this particular box, right? If it is 0, it cannot be minus, of course. If it is 0, then it will not show this box. It will just show me this button that's there, or it will actually show me this my job list as well, but we can handle that later. Right now, let's see what error we have got. Okay, so it's saying this name is already in use because we use the same name um, in action output. So component state, I'm just going to change the name a bit. Yeah, so the error vanished, right? So now let's look at the test mode. So this session has expired, so we need to create a new session. Let's see if what we did is coming out successfully or not. All right, so if you see, it is, you are only seeing a loading sign and nothing else is coming, right? And user is logged in. It is showing the global properties, but nothing about the collections that we did, right? Now it showed something, which is my job list, and it showed this create job thing, right? Okay, so now let's do a create job. So we add a job title, let's say graphic designer. Add compensation is let's say rupees 50,000 per month. Add location Delhi and do graphic designing. Right now I'm going to click on this add job details. So ideally it should create that document. But it is just moving continuously and not um, mm, not moving forward, right? So there's probably some error that has happened, right? And the error that I believe is that we have not set Firebase rules properly, right? So if I go back to projects now, the reason why this is happening is because it might not be having permissions to update the job listing collection. Okay, so if I go to this project, in go to the Firestore part where we created these collections, you see there is a settings icon, right? So I go to this settings icon and you see there is something called Firestore rules and it says not deployed, which means that the whether or not you have access to access the job listing collection in Firestore or Firebase, or the applications collection is not clear, right? So we just need to hit deploy. We can cover what is the meaning of these users collection, etc., a bit later, but as from the headlines you can see of create, read, write, delete, it gives permissions at different levels to be able to change the collections that are there in Firebase. So I'm going to hit deploy over here. Okay, so it's saying that it looks like that we have not created any documents as such in Firebase. So let's go back to Firebase and see what the issue is. So we go to Firebase database. So client Firestore, it's asking to create database, right? It is asking for location. I'm going to choose a location which is closer to India. Next. So you saw two options over here, production mode and test mode. In case of test mode, all the collections are available for access by any user for 30 days or so. In production mode, it is deployed as per the security rules, right? So now our database is created. So we did not do this step of creating a database. That's why we were facing errors over there. So now I'll go to Firestore rules and try deploying this again. Great. So this is now deployed. Now we should be able to run this properly, right? So I'm going to reload this. I'm just adding the details to graphic add job details. So one reason it could not be happening is because when we created or we authenticated as a user, we did not create the user document. Right. So okay, so this user document is now created. This job listing is also created, but we are not seeing anything in this job list, right? So uh, so let's go back and check what happened over there. So when we created this, we added a rule. So let's go to the home page, right? So we added a rule when we added this query, if you remember, that it should show only those job lists which have the recruiter reference equal to the user record reference, right? So so that is something which is false right now because we did not save reference recruiter while creating the job. So we are going to make some change over here in the create job field. We are going to open the bottom sheet that we created, job details form, add job details. We go to the action editor, and in action editor, when we are creating this document, we are going to add one more field. We are going to add this field of reference recruiter, and we are going to add this as the authenticated user reference. So when a job is created, we are also storing in the job that ref recruiter is the user over here itself, right? And then now once we create a job and it will have these details, it should be working fine. So let me refresh this. Right. So that was part one, right, where we created that reference. Now we are going to create this job again. Graphic designer, add compensation, 50,000 per month. Bengaluru, do graphic design work, and I say add job details. Now you see, as soon as I added this, it is coming in my job list, right? It is showing in my job list. So let's say I add one more here is software developer, is 70,000 per month. Location is Delhi, and software development, and I click add details. Again, this is added, right? So this list is working fine, right? Now the next step is, of course, once this list is created, um, uh, um, uh, a recruiter would want to like click on it and see how many people have applied to this particular role and what is the status of those roles, etc., and all that. For that, we will have to move to the user part of the application where we will take a reference of these job lists and will create simple flows for a user to be able to apply to these jobs. Okay, and it will create those documents of application documents that are there, and that we will cover soon.